I think the Jewish people point to the existence of God and give some clues as to what God might be like. Hi, I'm Marcus and I've written a short chapter about the Jewish people in my book The God Puzzle. I've also made it into an animated video, but here I want to share a few more thoughts. I'm slightly hesitant to talk about this piece of the God Puzzle. It feels like a really sensitive subject and I don't want to say something unintentionally offensive or contribute towards the propagation of malicious stereotypes. I think that's why this was the last chapter of my book to be completed. I kept writing and rewriting it and even contemplated leaving it out altogether. I didn't want to be misunderstood or stir up trouble, but I did want to point out something important that I think I see. Maybe you will see it too and join me in pondering its significance. So what is it? Well, the Jewish people have been massively persecuted by different groups over a long period of time. Yet they have mysteriously survived all attempts to wipe them out and remain an identifiable people today. In fact, they are once again a nation back in the land that has been such an important part of their history. I've used the term prospering, but I was hesitant in doing so because, as I say, I didn't want to be misunderstood as propagating lazy or dangerous stereotypes. People have in the past played up the idea of Jewish success in order to provoke jealousy and turn others against them, and I really didn't want to be involved in doing that. I was also a little uncomfortable suggesting that the Jewish people had prospered given all the suffering that they have experienced. But that's exactly the point I'm trying to make. They have been massively persecuted and yet continue to survive and at times even thrive. But is that really true? They have certainly survived, but to what extent is the thriving of the Jewish people an exaggerated misrepresentation maliciously perpetrated with selective evidence? Well, as far as I was able to look into it, there did seem to be some solid facts and figures to back it up. Here is a summary that is typical of many statistics I came across. Less than 0.2% of the world is Jewish, yet 22% of Nobel Prize winners are Jews. 41% of Nobel laureates in economics are Jewish, as are 11% of the world's billionaires and 20% of the world's richest 50 people. I guess these figures could be wrong or misleading or portray only part of the picture, but they seem to back up my impression that at times Jewish people sometimes do disproportionately well in a nation or culture. Now, they've also been disproportionately persecuted too, but again, that's the tension that has captured my attention. As I was wrestling with all this, I was somewhat reassured to read Dennis Prager's book, Why the Jews? As a Jewish man himself, it would be hard to accuse him of anti-Semitism, yet he describes in some detail both the persecution and the prospering of the Jewish people. He explores several reasons for their persecution, which I will summarise in a moment, but first, here is how he describes it. Hatred of the Jew has been humanity's greatest hatred. While hatred of other groups has always existed, no hatred has been as universal, as deep, or as permanent as anti-Semitism. The Jews have been objects of hatred in pagan, religious and secular societies. Fascists have accused them of being communists, and communists have branded them capitalists. Jews who live in non-Jewish societies have been accused of having dual loyalties, while Jews who live in the Jewish state have been condemned as racists. Poor Jews are bullied and rich Jews are resented. Jews have been branded as both rootless cosmopolitans and ethnic chauvinists. Jews who assimilate have been called a fifth column, while those who stay together spark hatred for remaining separate. Hundreds of millions of people have believed that Jews drink the blood of non-Jews, that they cause plagues and poison whales, that they secretly plot to conquer the world and that they murdered God. Prager argues that hatred of the Jews can be linked to four main factors unique to their Jewishness. 1. The God they worship. 2. The laws they follow. 3. The nation they comprise. And 4. The conviction of their chosenness. I'll unpack these a bit more now, indicating how they might provoke persecution. Number 1. The God they worship. The Jews believe there is one God. This necessitates that polytheists and atheists alike are equally wrong, and no one likes to be told they're wrong. Number 2, the laws they follow. It's not just modern people who kick against the unyielding thou shalt nots of the Ten Commandments, and when the Jews lived out God's law, they stood out as distinct among those around them. Number 3, the nation they comprise. The Jews retained their sense of nationhood even when they did not have their own land, which had the potential to provoke concern in the nations in which they resided. And those tensions have not exactly eased since the acquisition of land. Finally, number 4, the Jewish conviction that they had been chosen by God. This has often been misunderstood to imply some sort of superiority, but that was never the basis of God's choice as revealed in their scriptures. They were chosen not because of their own merit, but by God's grace, and not simply for their own benefit, but to be a light to the nations, spreading monotheism, showing what God was like and pointing people to him, which, as it turned out, was to involve as much suffering as it was success. Next, Prager suggests that the higher quality of Jewish life enjoyed in education, sobriety, family and charity have provoked others to jealousy and made them an easy target for false accusations. For example, in terms of education, they took the biblical imperative, teach your children, both seriously and broadly. He writes, "The high level of Jewish intellectual and professional achievement in the Western world is the most obvious example of Jews successfully applying to the secular world a value they acquired from Judaism." And then I was reassured to read Prager give some by now familiar sounding statistics. The secularization of this commitment to study among American Jews has produced remarkable results. It is not surprising that the American grandchildren of Jews, such as the woodchoppers of Berdichev, though numbering just over 2% of the population, have won almost a third of Nobel Prizes awarded American scientists, are overrepresented in medicine, law and mathematics by more than 3 times their proportion in the general population, in psychiatry by more than 5 times, and in dentistry by 4 times. So Jewishness led to a focus on education, which contributed to their success. Rabbi Daniel Lapin, in his book Thou Shalt Prosper, lists 10 Jewish traits that he believes can lead to Jews being financially successful. For example, believing that money is not intrinsically evil, but rather can be a good thing. That was his first principle, the dignity and morality of business. Of course, money can be used for bad things and you can get it by deceiving people. But if you are honest with people and provide them with something good, which they are willing to pay for, everybody wins. A successful business that makes money can be a sign that you are providing people with a valuable service. Business, at its best, drives the flow of mutual benefit. Having said that, the Bible also highlights the danger of a desire to get rich. Money has a habit of corrupting the heart, and so great care needs to be taken to avoid dragon fever. But that's another story for another time. Right now, I just want to note that a belief system that holds gold to be good can help foster economic success. Rabbi Lapin's second principle was to do with connectedness. The power of networks and connectivity has long been recognized. Robert Metcalfe, co-inventor of Ethernet, came up with Metcalfe's law, which gives a formula to the network effect. It states that a network's value is proportional to the square of the number of its users. Now, some have reduced the square component to a more modest 1.69, while others, like David Reed, argue that in a network with subgroups, the exponent should be the number of people in the network. So the value or utility of a network is 2 to the n. Whatever formula works best, I'm sure you get the idea. Connections between people are powerful. The value of eBay or Ethereum or Facebook increases with the number of people using them. Connections are also important in the brain. It's not just our 100 billion neurons that help us think. It's the trillions of connections between them that power our thoughts. In our frontal cortex, for example, each neuron can be connected to thousands of others. And we're only just beginning to harness the power of artificial interconnectedness in systems like OpenAI's DALL-E 2. Why is all that relevant? Well, a core value arising out of the Jewish faith is fostering close connections between people, and this connectivity is another key driver of Jewish success. At the start of the Bible, God says, "It is not good for man to be alone," and then a few chapters on, people are so connected that he is recorded as saying, "Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them." In context, of course, the Tower of Babel project was so misguided that God had to throw a linguistic spanner into the works. But it does highlight for us, once again, the power of connectedness, a value that, for the Jewish people, is deeply grounded in God's word. I won't go through all 10 principles, but perhaps just one more. Number 9 is called acting rich, which basically involves being generous and giving away 10% of your income. Again, an important aspect of Jewish law. This generosity not only guards against the love of money, but it shares the wealth around, enabling individual success to lift up the whole community. So, seeing the value of education, having a positive attitude to money, and being generous are examples of Jewish values enshrined in their scriptures. These beliefs and others have not only played a role in Jewish success, but have also at times provoked persecution. That is what I see, maybe partially and communicated imperfectly, but from where I'm standing, the Jewish people have experienced both persecution and prospering to an extent that grabs my attention. Prager and others do a superb job of confirming this as well as exploring some of the reasons for it, but for me the whole thing retains an air of providence. The people who claimed hundreds of years ago to have been chosen by God in order to point people to God went on to remain centre stage in the unfolding drama of human history. Their light has never been snuffed out, though many have tried. But I want to finish with a point which for me is decisive. You see, there was one Jewish man in particular who claimed to be the light of the world, and it's hard to think of anyone else who has had a greater influence on the world than Jesus. It's Jesus ultimately who reveals God to me. He was persecuted to the point of crucifixion, but according to the Bible's account, prospered through his resurrection from the dead to redeem his people, receive all power and authority, and inherit a renewed creation. Isaiah chapter 53 is a prophetic prediction written hundreds of years before Jesus' birth. It captures perfectly the predetermined nature of Jesus' persecution, preservation, and prospering with these words. It was the will of the Lord to crush him. He has put him to grief. When his soul makes an offering for guilt, he shall see his offspring. He shall prolong his days. The will of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. There are now over 2 billion people in the world who claim to follow Jesus, and many of them seem to have inherited this dual persecution-prospering trait. Christianity has led to large parts of the world prospering materially and socially. In other parts, though, Christians are persecuted economically, socially, and even physically. Following Jesus can make life work wonderfully well in some ways, but it can also make it incredibly difficult in others. Jesus warned his followers, if they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. But he also promised them abundant life, and they experienced inexpressible joy. The Jewish people point me to God through their providential persecution and preservation. What they do partially, Jesus does perfectly. In fact, Jesus does not just point me to God, he reveals God to me and enables me to know him personally. And I hope that you'll get to know him too. If you do, you will no doubt share firsthand in this strange and thought-provoking mix of persecution and prospering. While the former will only be for a short time, the latter will last forever. Your life will be preserved even through death to a joy-filled eternity with God in a bountiful recreation of all things.